Good morning. I am Greg Dresco, and I am joined by my colleague Iris White from CSDE. We welcome you to this pop-up PD presented to you today by the Connecticut State Department of Education Turnaround Office. Today's meeting will not be recorded, but the presentation and tools are available on the CSDE Turnaround Office website under the Professional Learning tab. They were uploaded to the landing page prior to the conclusion of today's presentation. The final slide will have a link for your convenience. Pop-up PDs are designed to be quick, timely, and responsive to your needs. So it's important to share with our office what topics you'd like to see in the future to continue to support you. Our hope is this is another opportunity to join together as a community of learners and facing new challenges, leaning on one another, and ultimately working towards achieving equity and excellence for all students. This structure of pop-up PD may also be something you turnkey and implement with your staff. We all know there's a wealth of knowledge within your own schools and districts. Having these short, bite-sized pop-up PDs led by a variety of staff may be something that you adopt and adapt within your own schools.
Our learning targets for today will be that we will first determine how to intentionally plan for engagement opportunities. We also ask that you use the QR codes to engage with us and share ideas with your colleagues in the professional learning. Finally, we will also explore available resources for your own professional learning and practices.
So let's talk about engagement, what it is and what it's not. Compliance is not engagement and just doing something with your hands. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're learning. In the book Teaching with Vision, Culturally Responsive Teaching in a Standards-Based Classroom, Sleeter and Kornbeth redefine engagement as minds-on, not just hands-on engagement. Students need to be intellectually engaged through problem solving in academic context that is meaningful to them. Isolated responses to be judged as correct or incorrect does not promote engagement. Also, also, being cautious of over scaffolding can hinder engagement. Students need to be talking, thinking, and making connections in order to have their minds on and develop an understanding. That being said, student engagement is increasingly seen as an indicator of successful classroom instruction and is increasingly valued as an outcome of school improvement activities. Engagement occurs when students are invested in the learning behaviorally, cognitively, and emotionally.
Knowing the why in all we do helps to bring meaning and purpose to the effort. So, why is engagement important? Research has shown that disengaged students are more likely to skip classes, engage in challenging antisocial behaviors, and are more at risk of dropping out of school.
Learning Sciences reports from a study conducted in 2021 by Edweek Research Center that there is a disconnect between teachers and students' perception of morale and motivation in this new era of teaching and learning. Students self report a lower level of less motivation at 50% and a lower morale at 49% as compared to their motivation and morale prior to the pandemic. Teachers, however, perceive student levels to be less motivated at 87%, and students have a lower morale of 82% upon return from remote or hybrid learning in the post pandemic world. This study supports that students feel they are more motivated and want to learn now more than teachers perceive them to be. Additionally, this shows perhaps why we are seeing a shift back to teacher centered instruction and away from the student centered engaging learning that had taken place prior to the pandemic.
Let's look more locally. The Connecticut Thought Exchange was set up on May 20th, 2020, as a way to collect data about our students here in Connecticut. Since the Thought Exchange requires students to write their own thoughts and rate other students' thoughts, it was deemed that it would be best suited for students in grade 5 and above to participate, though any other students were also welcome to respond. All responses were anonymous. This slide shows a breakdown of where and how students attended school when responding to this survey.
Among the questions was one about engagement. Here's what middle school and high school students had to say about that topic. The overarching trend around engagement was that students wanted assignments that weren't busy, monotonous, tedious, and overall were engaging. They want education and learning to be fun. Speaking of learning, that was another topic that students were asked about in the survey. This slide shows the overall theme and answers for that particular topic. Some students responded that they feel they aren't engaged or learning anything anymore. They're just doing the work that isn't meaningful to them. Students say that they aren't concerned with the grades and they actually want to learn.
In summary, it's proven that effective engagement leads to learning, which leads to student success. The studies have also shown that students want to see effective engagement applied in the classroom so that they can learn the material being presented to them in a meaningful way. So, as with all professional learning, how do we tie this together and what does this look like in the classroom? Within the CSTE K through 12 curricula design, there is a section for intentional planning around curricula, units within the curricula, and finally individual lessons within the unit. Our focus today for implementing strategies will be centered on the lesson planning portion. To view the Design Principle Toolkit, scan the QR code above. In order to have effective engagement, you must intentionally plan for effective engagement. This session is framed around the different components of intentional lesson planning and how to use that as a frame for planning for engagement. The 5 components of lesson planning we will be discussing are listed above. They are setting the goal, accessing students' prior knowledge, introducing new information, applying new information, and closing or setting the goal. Each section above is linked for you to jump to that location so that you can easily go to a section for your professional learning. Our goal today is to take you through each section and provide strategies and examples of how to better engage students in your lessons. When setting the goal for students, be sure to restate the goal not only at the beginning of the lesson, but also throughout. When students are clear on the expectations of learning, they become more engaged in owning their learning and the intended outcome. In order for students to become champions of their own learning, they must be aware of what the target is, as well as understand and be able to articulate where their performance is in relation to mastering the target. The first step is to unpack the learning target. Teachers can do so by focusing the student's attention to the verbs in the target, reviewing domain-specific and academic vocabulary in the learning target, and explaining how students will be successful in reaching the learning target. After unpacking the target, students should have a clear picture of what meeting the learning target looks and sounds like, and they should have a clear understanding of how the work they do will lead them towards achieving the target. Effective unpacking of a learning target can be engaging, help teachers pre-assess students' readiness to work towards the target, and finally help students get ready to work. To see this in action, click on Unpack the Learning Target in the slide above. What are you learning?
We're learning about slime.
How do you know if you're successful in learning about slime?
We don't want the slime to stick to us.
What do you notice about the student's response? In this example, the learning target may have been clear, but the student's understanding and ownership of the target is not. The learning target was not effectively unpacked in this case. What are you learning?
We're learning about solids, liquids, and gases.
How do you know if you're successful in learning about solids, liquids, and gases?
We can define and relate each phase. Right now, we're learning about solids, liquids, and gases by creating slime.
How is this response different? After unpacking the learning target, the same learning target was used, but this student has a much clearer understanding of what the expected outcome is, along with how they will be successful. Notice the use of vocabulary by the student, along with the actionable verbs in the response to show the student would know they were successful.
Once the learning target is unpacked, clearly defined, and students show understanding of the target and outcomes, the next step that provides an opportunity to engage students is to access prior knowledge. Making connections to previous learning or life events helps students to own the knowledge that will be learned. On the next slide, we show a video on how a teacher effectively uses strategies to find out what the students know, as well as what they would still need to learn. As you watch, make note of the strategies and probing questions that she's using.
When we cook our meals at home, What is the source of fuel for those tools that we're cooking in?
We use gas.
We use gas, we use coal. What else could we use?
In this video, you'll see the adult helping youth make connections to prior knowledge as they design, build, and test their own cooking stoves. Watch as she guides youth in sharing and exploration of different predictions and helps connect the activity to the prior experiences of the youth and also to broader societal and world issues.
As we're using up all of these resources that we do have access to, what should we be thinking about? Who should we be thinking about?
People who don't have access to it.
Maybe people who don't have access, right? What else do we know about fire? What does fire let out? Smoke, carbon dioxide. What happens if I'm cooking over my 3-stone fire every day? What am I constantly doing? What am I doing? I'm inhaling all of that smoke. Who do you think is cooking mostly over these 3-stone fires? Women. So we've all been around fire before. We all have had experiences with fire before, right? What do we know about fire? What are just general things? What do we know about fire?
Wind can make fire stronger.
Ooh, okay. So air and the motion of air, which we call wind, makes fire stronger. What do you do when you want heat to be trapped?
We want to trap it.
How do you trap heat for yourself if it's a really cool?
Or light plants.
I put on a blanket or put on clothes. And do I want those clothes to be floating away from me? Or that blanket to kind of be like a cape? What do I want that blanket to do?
That's a good kind of response.
Yeah, right? Is there a word for that? Do you ladies know a word for that? There you go, insulation. So I want to maybe think of a way to do that with my stove, right?
So, what did you notice? What did the teacher do to lead students to increased engagement? Scan the QR code to go to a Padlet to write your answers. Please also like any other submissions that you may find interesting from our professional learning participants before we debrief. In addition to the strategies that you just saw in the video, there are other ways that you can capture prior knowledge from students. Most educators are aware of a KWL chart in which students tell you what they know, what they would like to know, and upon completion of a lesson or a unit, what they may have learned. The next few slides will focus on some additional ways to access prior knowledge. A schema background knowledge chart is a useful chart that is similar to a KWL chart, where students tell you what they already know and what they have learned. This helps students take ownership of their past and current learning. A 5 sentence organizer may be a bit more geared to the younger crowd, but can be more certainly tailored to be an effective tool to engage students at any level to utilize their senses as they talk about a topic. This tool is especially helpful for creating sentence and conversation starters within a think, pair, share, or a group setting, and is particularly useful for descriptive writing activities. One last example of a graphic organizer that is commonly used would be a web knowledge chart. In this organizer, students input the main idea or a topic sentence in the center and brainstorm anything and everything that they may know about it or that can be connected to it around the web. This helps students make connections to topics that they may already know about. You might even consider extending this web to include another layer of boxes or post-its outside of these for new knowledge as you begin applying information to your activity around your learning target.
Once you've accessed any prior knowledge from students, the next step for increased engagement opportunities is to introduce new information. There are many ways to introduce information, but in the next couple of slides, we show you some strategies that can be where you initiate the learning in order to achieve the learning target, while sparking students' interest that we spoke about earlier. Before we share some of our strategies, we would love to hear some of yours. Please scan the QR code and share some strategies that work for you in your classroom on the Padlet. What do you do to hook your students to new learning? One way to engage students in new information is to use pre-assessment strategies. One engaging strategy to pre-assess your students is called Four Corners. This strategy incorporates movement in a space along with student discourse in order to gauge where students are about a topic. As you can see, there are multiple methods to the Four Corners, so feel free to tweak this strategy to your own classrooms. Here we see more variations of the four corners method. The great thing about four corners is that it can be turnkey to fit the needs however you see best in practically any subject area. Another engaging pre-assessment activity is called placemat brainstorming. This can be a pre or post-assessment strategy where a large chart paper is used within small groups to have students talk about and write down what they already know about a subject as a pre-assessment strategy. As a variation, these can also be used later in a lesson to check for understanding or at the end as a form of assessment or an exit ticket. Thinking ahead, you could build on this activity using various colored ink or markers so students can visually see their progress of learning using different colors. An additional strategy is to use an anticipation and reaction guide. In this, students answer questions prior to the lesson pertaining to the information that will be learned. Using the same organizer or answer sheet, they go through the lesson and either keep the same response or change it based on what they learned. This can also be a useful talking tool for student to student discourse by asking them to agree or disagree to others' answers and why. Another popular method for introducing new information are to show videos that you as the teacher have screened ahead of time. We want to make sure the video is aligned to target of the day, appropriate for our learners, and easy to comprehend. These videos should be used within reason. They should not be a replacement for teaching and learning, but rather a supplement to your instruction. As with other slides, each of the YouTube channels are linked on another document and can be found by scanning the QR code on the right. As with all new information being presented to students, including videos, a good reminder is to segment the new information into logical pieces. This will allow you to check for understanding, incorporate technology, or present opportunities for discourse in your classroom.
Once students have new material presented or taught to them, it's time for them to practice and apply those concepts and skills to show mastery towards the learning target. The activity or activities you provide students to learn and apply new information directly affects how well they learn the material and ultimately how successful they will be. Why is it important as a teacher or educator to know what type of learner you have in the classroom? We all know there are different learning styles and there is no one way to teach to every student. It's important for us to know our students so that we can plan to meet the needs of each and every student. By meeting their needs and addressing their learning styles, this will in turn lead to increased engagement as students can own the choice of work or project that they are doing. So, how do you do this? Let's explore this on the next page. This page is linked to additional information about how students may learn best, their characteristics, and strategies for teaching each type of learner. Listed above are the types of learners our students may be. Think about yourself. How do you learn best? Are you an auditory learner who remembers best by listening? Or perhaps you're a visual learner who has to see and write things down. Maybe you're a kinesthetic learner who has to be doing things physically in order to recall that information. If you're like me, you may be a combination of two of them. So, what are some strategies that we can use to build relationships with our students so that we can increase student engagement by crafting our lessons and activities to their learning strengths? Knowing our students allows us to intentionally plan activities and lessons where students can own the work, thus allowing for increased engagement as students are making the choice in how they do the work. Building relationships with students is a key factor into getting to know our students. Many people think these activities are beginning of the year activities, but these can be and should be done throughout the course of the year, especially informal observations, one on one conferences, and of course, family connections. As we mentioned early on in this professional learning, engagement should be minds on, not just hands on. Many of the strategies listed above will help you build relationships and trust with your students, but also help you identify how they best learn, whether it's auditory, visual, or kinesthetic, or a combination of two or more. As you get to know your students, intentionally planning activities to apply new information that provide students with the option to choose tasks are a great way to differentiate instruction and increase engagement through student ownership of their work. Activities are placed on graphic organizers called choice boards for students to select. Choice boards may be created using Bloom's taxonomy for higher order thinking, by learning styles, or using multiple intelligences. This particular choice board is an example from a science class. They can be used for reading, math, social studies, small group, or whole group instruction. Another way to increase student engagement and to make learning fun is through games. Most learning activities can be created into games to achieve your learning target and better help students understand the new material that was just presented to them in a fun learning way. Many common games such as Pictionary, Scrabble, Hopscotch, and Tic Tac Toe can be converted into something educational. To challenge students, you can also include on the previously mentioned choice board a square that allows students to create games to show their understanding of the material that is being taught. Learning platforms and other RPG type games, such as Prodigy for Math or Pop Tropica, that is literacy based, allow students to move around their own world where they earn rewards for completing standards based assignments or quizzes assigned by the teacher. The pictures above are linked to where you can learn more about the games that you can implement into your classroom. Another strategy for applying new information would be through project based learning. Project based learning is a method in which students gain knowledge and skills by working for an extended period of time to investigate and respond to an authentic, engaging, and complex question, problem, or challenge. These types of activities can help students in each of the learning styles be successful as it addresses characteristics of all three. A link is attached to the picture above to take you to PBL Works, a site that dives deeper into how to implement project based learning successfully. Inquiry based activities are another strategy that can increase student engagement. Inquiry based learning is a research based strategy that actively involves students in the exploration of the content, issues, and questions surrounding an idea or concept. The activities and assignments in an inquiry based learning classroom are designed such that students work individually or in groups to solve problems involving both in class and out of class assignments. Once again, there is a link attached to the image above for you to dive deeper into inquiry based learning. One last thing to keep in mind when creating engaging activities for students is how they will be completing the activities. The opportunities for learning you ask your students to complete can be individually, in small groups, or together as a whole group. When allowing students to work in small groups, a good strategy is to allow roles to be assigned and tasks to be completed that allow that ownership of the work by the student to continue. For example, a visual learner may choose to be the note taker or take on the role of drawing or writing on the project, while an auditory learner may want to be a reporter and timekeeper while listening to the group work. Kinesthetic learners may choose to add physical movement to the project and would be responsible for the creation of that piece. Keeping in mind the learning styles we spoke about when deciding what activities best achieve the learning target keeps students engaged. This allows for continued ownership of their participation in the activity and their learning.
Finally, as with all lessons, a return to the learning target and closure should occur once students have worked on applying the new information they received. This doesn't mean your lesson is completed, as many lessons take place over the course of several days. What this means is at the end of the time allotted to your lesson, effective closures and checking for understanding help to engage students the next time they are in the class by capturing misconceptions in order to reteach for understanding or fuel excitement for the next piece part of the lesson. The next couple of slides are ways to engage students in the final piece of the teaching process that are different than a stand and deliver closure.
Snowstorm is one way to check for understanding in a fun way. In Snowstorm, students write down what they learn on a piece of scratch paper and wad it up like a snowball. Given a signal, they throw their paper snowballs up into the air like a snowball fight. Then each learner picks up a nearby response and they read it aloud. For Parent Hotline, it's another strategy that incorporates family engagement into the learning. You give the students an interesting question about the lesson without further discussion. Teachers then email their guardians the answer so that the topic can be discussed over dinner.
Gallery walks may or may not be new to educators. Gallery walks allow students to create pieces about what they learned in project form. Students then travel to each completed piece and give feedback on sticky notes to the project. This is also an engaging way for teachers to assess without it feeling like an assessment. This is also a great way to get students involved in the process as well as bring closure to a lesson or unit. The picture above is linked to an article on how to implement gallery walks in your classroom.
Creating timelines through sites like TimeToast offer interactive ways to represent the sequence of events, of historical events, literature, or it can be turnkeyed into checking for understanding around pretty much any subject area. The picture above is linked to the website for TimeToast for you to check it out yourself.
Two final ways to engage students in closure are question stems and exit ticket folders. Question stems are a great way to incorporate student-to-student discourse to close a lesson as students frame questions using Bloom's taxonomy around the learning target and goals. Students then exchange the card and discuss the answer to the question they have just received. Last but not least are exit ticket folders. These differ from a traditional exit ticket in that students answer a question to the best of their ability, but instead of just submitting to the teacher, use a self-reflection of their knowledge to place the card in the appropriate folder around how well they understood the material.
Additional strategies for closure can also include formative assessments. Scan the QR code above to see a list with detailed descriptions for additional closure or formative assessment activities to check your students' understanding about the material that was just presented. These are quick, effective ways to check for understanding, but also offer data collection opportunities to drive your instruction for future planning purposes. That brings us to a close for our professional learning for today. As you intentionally plan your lessons around the 5 areas of lesson implementation, we hope that you were able to take away some strategies to try as you focus on increasing student engagement in your class.
For additional professional learning, don't forget to visit our Connecticut CT Learning Hub, where you will find additional pop-up professional developments, along with our pop-up PD playlist that is connected to this professional learning about student engagement.
Located here are resources that were used for this professional learning, in addition to our pop-up PD playlist that was previously mentioned. Thank you for joining us for today's professional learning on increasing student engagement. You can find our contact information here should you have any other additional questions in the near future. Thank you again.